Hello, everybody, and welcome to our event hosted by the IMT Madison. If America should go socialist, we'll be ready to start here in just a few minutes, at around 4 o'clock. So, in the meantime, settle in, grab some popcorn, and we'll see you soon. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Marxist Study Group, If America Should Go Socialist, presented by the IMT Madison. Today is going to be a very special event. We have two speakers today, comrades Dylan and Alex, and I will be introducing them very shortly. But first, a little business. The IMT is part of the International Marxist Tendency, which is a worldwide organization fighting for socialism. You can find information about our branch on imtmadison.org, as well as the international website is Marxist.com, and you can find our newspaper and information about the national section in the United States at socialistrevolution.com. Now, we are, working class people fighting for socialism, so we could use all the support we can get. So if you would like to help contribute to build the forces of socialism here in Madison and all across the world, you can donate. We're taking donations over Venmo at Ivy Geertz. And I believe there's a typo in that banner. I believe it's IVY Geertz. But yes, let's see. I can. Anyway, so we should have a great discussion today. As you know, the name of the discussion is "If America Should Go Socialist." Now, let's see. All right. So, there's been a lot of discussion about this because there's been a absolute eruption of movements in the working class in the United States in this past year. With the George Floyd protests, a lot of people never thought they'd see a movement of this scale in the United States. And people, a lot of people on the right would say, socialism will never work, and comparing, places like Venezuela and Soviet Russia, and saying, oh, it's been tried, it failed. But, we see that, members of the capitalist class, members of the bourgeois kind of like to paint a false image of socialism. And we have to take into account conditions in the United States right now are very different than those places. There's a greater abundance of materials. There's more than enough resources to take care of every person with a rational, planned economy. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what that will look like. And to start off that conversation, I'm going to introduce my comrade Alex. Alex has been a comrade for a very long time. He's been a vital part of the branch and the work that we do here in Madison. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you, Alex. Whenever you're ready, you can take it away.
All right, Liam, thank you very much. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. And yes, for us, this is a very important topic today, very relevant. I think even when the forces of Marxism and the revolutionary socialism is still in its infancy, we don't have millions of communists or socialists on the street planning to take power. Yet the name of socialism comes out in all the mainstream media venues, right? From the suspects on the so-called left media, as even the Fox News, they use the name quite a bit. Obviously, they mean many things. Many of them have nothing to do with a Marxist perspective and real, genuine socialism. But what is a fact is that socialism is part of the conversation here in the United States today. If any, when we see beyond the rhetoric of the Democratic Party, of the Republican Party, actually, more importantly, when we see the youth and the working class in this country, more than 70% actually, from the age of 18 to 30 today, they will be willing to give opportunity to socialism, even if they don't consider socialists themselves. Also, we can see there is a lot of anger against the government, against the status quo, against the political class, which we think that is another testimony or another sign that for sure the population, the working class and youth of this country is thinking seriously how to change the system. And socialism, obviously, is one of the options, is one of the possible outcomes of this change of regime that many of us we already are in a desperate need to finish all these this chaos, sufferness, and crisis that capitalism is forcing upon us day after day. To start this discussion, we come back to one writing from Trotsky, Leon Trotsky, who was one of the leaders of the Russian Revolution, who held the working class and the peasantry in Russia in 1917 to go from capitalism into socialism, and also who his last years before he was murdered by a Stalin agent, he defended the ideas of genuine Marxism and socialism, and what it really was socialism intended back in 1917 against the character, the deformation that we found in Russia some years later, especially after 1930, when Stalin consolidates the bureaucracy or turns the Soviet revolution into a defunct workers' state and a totalitarian regime. So Trotsky writes this article, "If America Shall Go Communist," in 1934, with one eye into explain and help to clean the name of socialism and explain what it really is and what it's not, against the lies of the right wing, and also the lies of the Stalinist bureaucracy, the lies of the Russian bureaucracy at the time. But with another eye also, with looking watching the developments of the class struggle in the United States in the 30s. After 1929, we have this big crisis, similar to 2008, if we want to look some kind of parallels in terms of how that really transformed the psychologies, right? And the way that many people, millions of people who before maybe they weren't connected with politics, they weren't activists, they weren't, necessarily very concerned with what happened in our society, but, a crisis that, for instance, in 2008, forced millions of people to lose their houses, lose their jobs, to lose their retirement plans. It really updates you. It forces you to start thinking what's wrong in this society, what it needs to change. In 1929, we see something similar, with a change in society even more abrupt. I mean, it was a colossal in crisis, economic crisis, not only in the United States, but all over the world. And it kind of updates or helps the working class to do the same questions that we are asking ourselves today. So Trotsky in 1934 is writing this article thinking, well, there's a lot of workers that now finally they see capitalism doesn't work, that, it doesn't matter the sacrifices, the wars, the working hard, the lies and the promises of the capitalists. Every so often, a crisis can crash our dreams of prosperity, crash our own livelihood and the ones of our kids and relatives. So it was an article. It was very optimistic, and it was an article that it shows how to speak the working class in the United States in the face of a big crisis, in the face of a lot of questions, but also a working class in the United States in the 30s that have not yet get the conclusion to be a revolutionary force, right? This process to taking on into that mentality or mindset, but not necessarily crystallizing into it. I just say this because those who are watching the video, if you want to know more about this text, you can find it on the archives, or even on our website in socialistrevolution.org. But we think that it's a very good reading. One thing that I think it was very interesting in terms of the similarities, right, is that both in the 30s and today, we have in the middle of this decomposition of society, right, and this anarchy, this uncertainty, we see also the rise of populism, both in the right and in the left. And today in the United States, we see that translated into obviously Trumpism, and before that the Tea Party and the rhetoric, far-right rhetoric of the Republican Party, which have installed itself and it has the trust and the support of many millions of workers in this country. And also we see some kind of mild version of left populism in the Democratic Party, even if it's only by words, and it really doesn't mean much when a Democrat says that they are socialists. But we have cases like even in the case of Bernie Sanders and other candidates, that it really have tried to move the Democratic Party into, at least as I say, on words, on the rhetoric, on the speeches, into a more socialist or left platform. And that actually have dynamized the votes and many layers of the youth and the working class, that suddenly they are more interested in politics and they are more interested in radical ideas when they are offered to them. This rise of populism today is a little different to the rise of populism of the 30s, but it signifies really a characteristic of the epoch that we are getting today into, which is a lot of instability and really no real solutions for the economy, real solution for living and working conditions of the working class and the youth all around the planet. In 1929, there was this big crash in the United States in the stock market, that translating in a earthquake, really in the destruction of the economy, and the real Main Street so-called economy. With that, the livelihood of millions of people. And it was the Second World War, really, what it was able to create the material basis, the economic elements to create a new boom and create a recovery and actually improve the livelihood of millions of people. And also, obviously, that for the Marxist perspective, this is not a coincidence. We don't support wars, obviously, but what other way capitalism can fix its own and main contradiction, which is at one point or another, the ability to produce things is antagonistic, is in contradiction with the ability of the workers to buy them. Every time we produce something, every time we work for 1 hour or 10 hours, doesn't matter, for the employer, we are going to get a little fraction of what we really are producing, the wealth, the value that we put in back into the market. So it is very difficult for the workers to buy back all what we produce. And eventually this super production, this what the capitalists call crisis, for us is a big contradiction when so many people are in need of food, of housing, of healthcare, education, and yet the crisis that we have in front of us is not the lack of those resources that we need, that humanity needs, but actually the inability to connect the needs and the resources out there, because obviously in the middle of this transaction of humanity producing and humanity realizing what we need to do today, we have this parasite class, the bourgeoisie class, the capitalist class, that is taxing what humanity creates to a point of crisis, to a point that the market is not able to satisfy all this production. That limit was reached in 1929, where there was such a overproduction everywhere that they have to start closing the factories, and that created a domino effect in the economy. There was panic. There was absolutely no certainty that investing more money on real production was going to create profits, and that created even more closing of factories, more people unemployed, and etc. In 2008, we had something similar. Most of the money have not been invested into creating new factories or producing the things that we need, but actually in the big casino of Wall Street, on the speculation, on all kind of financial products that they don't even understand themselves, which in the end, if in 1929 was a overproduction, what we have in 2008 is just the opposite mechanism and the same symptom, right? We have less people employed because most of the money is now going to the factories and not going to produce things. And in fact, they just disappear in a day in this kind of speculation fever of Wall Street and whatnot. At the end of the day, today we don't have the ability to destroy most of the competition, most of the production or capacity of production on the world to somehow regenerate capitalism. So what it was ended in 1941 to 1939 to 1945 with the Second World War, it is not possible today. But yet the decade of the 30s and what we've been seeing in the last 10 years are very similar, which is exactly we are in a crisis that we don't see a way to get out, a crisis that is manufactured by the crisis, by the capitalists, and also that is being imposed upon the workers. The workers are the ones that we have to pay for it in the form of austerity programs, cuts. Obviously, we're getting less money and less benefits. We saw in 2008. Today, perhaps it's not the wages for many people, but we are working way more than before. The rhythms of production keep increasing. Everybody's overworked. And yet, proportionally, we are getting the same or even less money in terms of what we need, right? Things are more expensive and our wages are not keeping up. They don't manage to get us from where we are. That's the situation we are today. So obviously, the capitalist politicians not having anything to offer to the working class, they resort to rhetoric, they resort to populism, to say a lot of things that sounds very radical, but in reality doesn't translate in real measures that it can change the problem that we have today. That is very similar, right? So what the United States will look like if it goes socialist, right? Because in this situation, it's very important to differentiate what it is and what it's not, right? Many people argue that socialism in the United States, it will inevitably becomes like this Soviet Russia that they so much like to publicize, where it's like a totalitarian regime with a big state that absorbs everything. Yet nothing can be farther from reality, right? The reasons why in Russia we have a big government, as they claim, it was because we didn't have the technology in 1917 to develop the industry as fast as we could to actually reduce the number of hours that the workers needs to do in order to contribute to society. We didn't have the communications, for instance, both infrastructure, but also, like phones or things like that, in order to really get a very efficient communication between everybody, all the Soviets, all the committees in Soviet Russia. What we have actually is the opposite. Many of millions of the Soviet Russians have to dedicate day and night to work for socialism, to work for the things that are needed. Meanwhile, a small layer of bureaucrats or administrators start taking on the political power that it was legitimately from the working class, and they start consolidating their own caste, if you want, and their own interests aside from the workers. Here in the United States, if we have socialism tomorrow, it will take weeks, if not a few months, to actually be in a society that we can all participate, either with the internet, with the computers and the phones that we have, with the know-how, with the infrastructures, with all the capacity that is already installed, right? United States is one of the more advanced capitalist countries, and among other things, it means that the only reason why we are not in a country with prosperity and with the things that we need, it's not because we don't have that technology already installed. It's because the capitalists decide not to use it, and let alone using it in our favor. But imagine if that technology will be in our hands, in the hands of millions of workers all over the world. So that's one of the aspects that we can guarantee for sure, that if we learn from the mistakes of the Soviet in Russia, especially the Stalinism, and we understand that the technology and the capacity, the production capacity of this country will get us to that point where, imagine if everybody only works 10 hours a week, right? And actually we have the way to participate in real democracy, in a socialist democracy, that is very different to what they tell us democracy is now, right? Right now in capitalism, basically we can vote every 4 years, every 2 years, every other year is you may for the local, state, and federal. And what do we choose? What are the things that we can decide and control with that vote? Very little. In reality, the political class and the state itself are property and a tool directly designed by the capitalists to reign society, to oppress us, to control absolutely everything. Even when we have our own candidates in power in capitalism, doesn't mean much. They boycotted, they create laws, and they challenge absolutely everything. They slow down progress. They slow down what the workers are wanting to do. Here in the United States, it's very clear because we have two parties that are basically representing absolutely the same. So meanwhile, should we have democracy? That democracy, a capitalist democracy, doesn't mean much to change the real things that affect us every day in our neighborhoods, in our workplaces, in our schools. Imagine a democracy that is based actually in the direct participation of millions of people every day. When we have the candidates or delegates or representatives that far to become a neo-class or a neo-caste, a group of privileged bureaucrats that they are deciding what happened in our lives, like it's happening today. We have instead representatives, delegates of every corner of the country, from every neighborhood, any town, any factory, any school, representing different parts of the population, unemployed, people with disabilities, different cultures, different groups in the country, that in one way or another we express that democracy. And those delegates actually will be recallable for us. So if somebody is not doing a good job, we wouldn't be waiting 4 years to remove them, but actually we will recall them immediately. Also, we will put limits of how much money they can make, and most likely will say no more money than a normal worker. So there is absolutely no perks, no privilege for workers, for politicians to try to take control on the state. We all will be politicians in that way. That's what we think American socialism will look like, a truly democracy. A total democracy, and kind of like finishing on my time a little bit, but a total democracy, there also will be economically democracy, right? Because I just discussed a little bit the things that we can do democratically, right? Like what a real democracy will look like, but what would that means apply it to our economy, right? When we need more schools, when we need more beds for the COVID-19, when we need a rational plan for the vaccines, instead of this stealing from the big corporations with their secret patents, with their clear profiteering interest to create a vaccine that's not even tested, only for their own benefit and profit. Imagine if instead of that, what we have is those committees, the expression of what the people want together, all the minds, all the talent, put it together democratically in order to create the best plan, in order to utilize the best technology that we have there, to reopen those factories that the capitalists keep closing, in order to create the masks, to create the ventilators that we have so many problems some months ago. You know, those new hospitals that we need today in many areas of the country. That is exactly what a socialist America will look like. And I will finish with two more aspects of what America will look like, but internationally. You know, some people will argue that a revolution in the United States, it will be a bloody civil war, or maybe like a war against the military. We think, we don't know what is going to happen. We don't know. We cannot guarantee anything on the future. But we can tell you one thing: even in the Russian Revolution, where the balance of classes between the capitalists, the peasantry, and the proletariat, the working class, it were absolutely not in favor of the workers. I mean, the workers at that time, they were about 5% of the whole population. If you think about it, in the United States today, we are above the 80% of the population we are workers with, meaning we depend on a paycheck week by week in order to get by, right? If we don't have employees, we don't have that check. Even if we are a contractor, we still have to work for somebody else that impose the condition, impose the price of what we are selling. Then we are workers, right? We are not leveraging big amount of money in order to get by, right? But it's actually our labor. It's our mind, our time, our energy, what it actually help us to get by and survive, and not to die without anything. That's what we consider what a worker is, and the vast majority of society today is actually part of the working class. But even in Russia, where that wasn't necessarily true, in terms of most of the people in Russia were exploited, were oppressed, but they were farmers, they were peasantry, and yet there was very few deaths during the taking the power in Russia. It was the foreign invasion that happens a little later, where they actually take more of the tolls in Russia during the revolution. But it was a peaceful revolution on all accounts. And the reason why it was a peaceful revolution is because when most of the people decide that it's time to change society, even the military can do nothing about it, right? Instead, what we see is the military breaking in class lines. When a good section of them, they say, farther for shooting my neighbor, my mother, or my sister, the people who are running outside saying that it's time to change the regime, I'm going to join them. And that's more possible today than 100 years ago. The other thing that we can rule most likely is that we are not going to have a foreign army invading us, but well, on contrary. Once we liberate the world from the imperialism, the imperial power of the United States, we will see a festival, as you may, of revolutions everywhere, right? Like Latin America, in Asia, in Middle East. We are responsible, no us, but the bourgeoisie of the United States is responsible to cut the heads of the revolution, to repress billions of people. Once we liberate that pressure, what we'll see is the peoples of other countries doing the same that we are going to be doing, which is a socialist revolution in their countries, and join together in prosperity and helping each other with technology, with resources, etc., etc. The other aspect, and I finish with this, and I think Dylan is going to complete with more programmatically what are the things we will be doing, right? But another argument is that, well, if we have a socialist revolution in the United States, it will be we will taking everything from everybody, right? It will be like expropriating, taking the ownership of everybody. That is obviously not true. That wasn't true in Russia in 1970s, not true. It won't be true here in the revolution we are going to have in the United States. Just expropriating or taking the 400 richest people in the United States, it will be sufficient, because they are already in possession of more than 70% of the economic control of the economic of this country, the economic activity of this country, which means that we are not interested to take your car, to take your house, to take your little business, your store in the corner, even the little manufactured shop down the road. That's not the problem. It's the banks, it's the Amazon, it's the Walmart. Actually, those culprits that right now, without socialism, are taking the stores, are taking the houses, are taking the property of many millions of hard workers, families who have no choice but surrender themselves because the capital is dominating everything. But in socialism, it will be just the opposite. We will socialize the major elements of society, the major distribution of society, like Walmart, like Amazon, the major, like Cisco, for instance, the technology, the food providers, and we will democratize the goods, the commodities. We will decide the production in order to satisfy the needs of millions of people today, that they go hungry to bed, or they don't have a job, or they need a house. That can be done without a temper or change the property of most of the population of this country, including the small proprietors, the small businesses. Now, we think that eventually people will surrender properties to the collective economy only for one reason. If I have like a store, let's say, right, like I have a little shop, and I'm free to operate it, but eventually I'm going to see that the socialist workers operated shop is going to be more efficient. They have more capital, they have better machines, they work maybe 3-4 hours a day, and they get absolutely everything that I get too. They have access to a house, they have access to time off, they have access to healthcare. Eventually, I will say, I love my job, but I don't see anymore the need to be a slave to it, a slave to my property in order to get ahead. the society in itself is arranged in a way that I don't need to do that. I can join the population, I can join the rest of society to produce together and reduce the number of hours that I have to do, the number of risks also that I have to take when I have a economic activity by myself. But it's not necessary to start with that. That we think is going to be voluntary as we advance in this collectivization, as we advance on creating a very efficient and powerful collective economy that will draw the small owners into the mix. So my time is exceeded. There's a lot of things to talk. I hope you join on the Zoom discussions, and we can talk about many other topics. But I know Dylan will complete this with other aspects of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Alex. Thank you for that excellent introduction to this topic. I know I've got a lot of thoughts bouncing in my head. I'm very excited for the discussion. So before we move on to Dylan, as Alex brought up, we will be having a discussion in Zoom, which you are all free to attend after the stream. Towards the end of the stream, we'll be posting the link to the Zoom, so keep a lookout for that. Up next, to continue to delve into this topic is our comrade Dylan. Dylan's been part of our organization for more than a year now, and he's been a very disciplined, hardworking comrade who's helped us a lot with our student work, and I'm sure he'll do a great job with this topic. So without any further ado, Dylan, you're free to go ahead.
Thank you, comrades. Another big component of this big nebulous topic, in a way, I suppose, is that even in Trotsky's day of writing this, there were some that believed that the American working class, the American people, were just not ready for socialism. And this idea, this almost doomerism, feels very prevalent today, that half of the American people are just a basket of deplorables, that they are so propagandized, so lied to by the mass media or by certain dynamic individuals in political positions of high power. And while there is some truth within this, while the capitalists own essentially every significant portion of the supposedly free press of this country, and project their ideology and their interests through it, within this there is contradiction. There is the contradiction of the dominant ideology of any society being that of the ruling class, but also the objective needs of the lower classes presenting themselves through their own lives. In essence, while they are told all of this nonsense about how great capitalism is and how just a little more of it will fix every problem in their lives, they see through their own experience, the workers, time and time again, that these privatizations and new fiscal policies and foreign and debates over foreign trade don't do anything to solve any of their real problems. They don't improve their conditions in any material way. Because no matter how reactionary an idea that the working class has, or no matter how conservative it begins, they're going to make it their own, and they're going to put their own interests on it. The working class doesn't fight collectively to break away from capitalism because they have all learned and done some research and been convinced that the traditions of old need to be abandoned, but because the material basis of capitalism creates this need to change society. And this shines through in all manner of ways. Conservatives would say that they want small government, or that government shouldn't be involved so heavily in people's lives. And as a rebuttal to socialism, even, they compare this experience to the Soviet Union, or at least what they've been told about it. If we deconstruct this logic, though, it's easy to understand why workers would want a small government, or a small state, as we would say. The current condition of the state is one that appropriates funds from the masses and distributes it for the interests of the ruling class, be it wars in some country that most Americans will never see, or new tax write-offs for the largest companies in the nation. And very little of it actually goes back to improving the lives of the working people. Our response to this sentiment of a small state would be agreement, with the caveat that instead of shrinking a state that is loyal to the capitalists from within, we would smash the state entirely and build one that's loyal to workers' interests, where they can participate directly and extract out what they put in full. Another thing that conservatives would say is they don't like socialism because the private sector is simply somehow more efficient. And while this isn't some inherent law of the universe, it makes sense within the context of American society how this myth came about. Our government and our state is purely ineffective, and in service to capital by design. Any faculties that help the masses improve quality of life don't come about by some goodwill of the rich and powerful, but because of either the agitation of masses of workers fighting to change society because of their own needs, pardon, or the unintended consequence of the rich and powerful investing in the means of production to make them run more efficiently. Likewise, any of these services that do improve living conditions have been slowly stripped away over the course of 50 years by a series of policies most people call austerity. This can be descriptive of any number of different services, be it more services that are traditionally thought of as welfare, such as Medicare and Medicaid, or even services that go to the benefit of most of society that are generally not thought of as such, like roads and schools and public schools. Our response to this is again smash the state, but also organize society into systems of committees to distribute resources based on material need. This is leaps and bounds more efficient than the capitalist free market, because we wouldn't waste funds on competing enterprises, failed businesses that couldn't handle the competition in marketplace, and maximize shareholder return, and the endless black hole that is the advertising industry. We would truly make the most out of the supplies available to our society. A final thing that conservatives say is that socialism brings devastation wherever it goes, has ruined great nations. To this, we have an analysis as well. There are lists upon lists of reasons for the failures of the deformation of the Soviet Union. The main one being that at the time of their revolution, they didn't have the basis for socialism, the sheer industry and goods to provide a basic standard of living for everyone. And so the Soviet state ended up having to act as though it were a policeman in a crowd of starving people. They bureaucratized their apparatus and consolidated power in fewer hands on this basis. And on top of this, the Soviet Revolution was one that happened alone. No other industrialized nations at the time built a worker state to lift the USSR out of its isolation. And so this character of bureaucratic layers sitting on top of society spread with revolutions that would follow. Places like China, Vietnam, and all over Latin America and Africa. And as such, we do not think that this is a concern for the United States, being the richest and most resource-abundant nation in the world. Undoubtedly, it has the material basis for socialism, and we ought not worry about such similar deformation because such a basis isn't present. Overall, though, this half of the working class that would be conservative, or that consider themselves conservative, act reactionary, whatever you want to call them, they're still workers. All that conservatism really is when presented in workers, is their material needs going through the lens of what is already familiar, what they already know. And undoubtedly what they already know is determined by the bourgeoisie. And so it's our job of us, the advanced layer of the working class, not to look down on them or to scoff at them, but to patiently explain there is a disconnect between what society has shown you and what society has conditioned you to believe, and what you need through your own physical life and experience. That's all I have to say on this. Thank you so much, and I hope you all come to the Zoom event afterwards.
Excellent. Thank you, Dylan. And thank you again, Alex, for contributing to this awesome discussion. I am very excited for the Zoom. I have just put the link on the screen. We'll also be posting it in chat here as well, so you can go ahead and link to there. We will see you in the Zoom. But before we go, just a few points. Let's see. You can check out our websites at imtmadison.org, socialistrevolution.org, and marxist.com to learn more about the IMT, as well as our work here in Madison in particular, and get connected with us so you can be part of the fight for socialism in our lifetimes. We appreciate any and all donations. The best place to donate is at Venmo at IB Geertz, should be flashing now on the screen. This helps keep our branch alive and healthy and building the forces of socialism, as well as helping us support things like, the Trotsky House in Mexico, and our comrades all over the world who need our support right now, as in these very turbulent times. So I thank you everybody for tuning in. Please join us in the discussion. It should be a great discussion. I look forward to seeing you all there. And thank you so much. Hope to see you soon. Thanks again.